to North Carolina Reading this evening. My name is Bethany Holmes, and I'm an editorial assistant with NCLR. I'd like to thank our senior editorial assistant, Max Kilgore, for setting up the technology for this event and for making sure that we're running smoothly. Also, thank you to Lily Johnson, Greg Keith, and Nigel Knight for helping make this event happen. Welcome also to our editor, Margaret Bauer, and senior associate editor, Christy Alexander Halberg, who are watching from their respective COVID retreats. And we send thanks to all of you tuning in. Tonight's event is co-hosted by the North Carolina Humanities Council, the sponsor of the Linda Flowers Literary Award that we're celebrating this evening. Thank you to Melanie Richeson, Development and Communications Manager of North Carolina Humanities Council, for her diligence in setting up and streaming this event. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our NCLR intern, Vedika, who will introduce our first reader.
Good evening. We're fortunate to have virtually here tonight Dr. Carol Scott Connor, whose essays, The Great Dimming of the Year 2020, was selected for the 2021 online feature section. Carol Scott Connor has authored and co-authored 9 major surgical texts and a book of short stories. Her other works to date have included numerous papers, chapters, and presentations on a wide range of surgical topics. She is currently at work on a 3rd book of surgical stories and happily revising 2 of her textbooks. Additionally, she is a graduate student in the creative writing program at Lenoir-Rhyne University in Asheville, North Carolina. She lives in Iowa City with her husband and teaches surgery at the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine. Please welcome Dr. Carol Scott Connor.
Thank you, Vedika. It's a privilege to read this tonight. The Great Dimming of the Year 2020. 4 large bright stars outline the body of the constellation Orion, the hunter. His right-hand shoulder facing us is the bright red star Betelgeuse. The stars that comprise Orion are not bound together in any way. They drift, each on its own journey through the universe, separated by vast distances that are compressed from our limited viewpoint into this transient pattern. The hunter will lose his shape as the eons speed by and the stars move relative to each other in cosmic time. You and I will have been married 46 years come summer. Like a double star, we are bound to each other by our mutual gravitational pull. If we were indeed stars, we might look like a single point of light to some alien astronomer on a planet encircling Betelgeuse. It has been cloudy for days. As dusk darkens into evening, I search the sky, hoping to glimpse a star. When I see one, I make a wish. It is always the same wish. It's bad luck to tell the wish, but I will say this. I don't ask anything for myself. I wish for something for us, and I wish it with all my heart. In January, I learned that Betelgeuse is dimming. This large star is normally one of the brightest stars in the night sky of winter at our latitude. Now it is growing faint. I have read about this, and I am frantic to see it myself. The stars remain cloudy. I want to show you Betelgeuse, but we are in the deepest part of winter. When it is clear, it is terribly cold and icy. I look out the windows. It is still overcast, night after night. Somewhere up there, behind the clouds, the moon wanes, moving in its inexorable cycle toward darkness, the new moon, and rebirth. Sometimes an old star goes out with a bang as a supernova. Other times it goes out with a whimper. If Betelgeuse goes supernova, it might happen anytime in the next 100,000 years, or it might happen next year. The waning light could be a prelude to a supernova, or it could mean nothing. I have wanted to see a supernova since I was a young child, when I first learned that a star could die in a final burst of brilliance. I retired from surgery more than 4 years ago. Nights, I often dream that I've been called back to practice. It's always after midnight, some kind of emergency. But I don't have privileges, I say to someone in the dream. Privileges are what we call the formal approval to perform certain kinds of surgery in a particular hospital. In my dreams, it doesn't matter. In my dreams, I struggle to remember all the key steps of the operation I will have to do. Sometimes I am actually operating, but I never have the right tools or any assistance. The anatomy is different. It is kitchen table surgery at the most macabre. My hands twitch in my sleep, you tell me. Sometimes I try to speak, and you'll jostle me just awake enough to calm me down. Betelgeuse is almost 700 light years away, so whatever is happening now actually unfolded 700 years ago. As we look out farther in space, we look farther back in time. Betelgeuse is a semi-regular variable star, well known for cyclic changes in luminosity over time. This variability was first documented by Sir John Herschel in the mid-19th century. It is now thought that there may be 3 separate cycles of variability, and that the present dimming may simply be a coincidence of 3 periodic minima. Astronomers have studied the surface of Betelgeuse. It is a red supergiant raging hot and fast and very near the end of its cosmic lifespan. In comparison, our own sun is a well-tended lantern in the darkness of space, burning steady and stable, generating just the right amount of heat and light, and not too much heavy ion radiation. The skin of Betelgeuse boils deceptively slowly with convection cells, much like those that cover the surface of our own sun, but significantly larger. These alternating bright and dark cells are large enough to possibly explain the visible decrease in brightness if, for example, the surface facing us had a temporary preponderance of dark cells. Maybe Betelgeuse just belched out a lot of gas, stardust that is, forming a dense cloud between us and its luminous surface and thus blocking much of its light. Or, and this is the most exciting possibility, it may have burned its way up the fusion ladder, hydrogen nuclei combining to create helium, and so on, to heavier and heavier atoms, each step requiring more energy so that now it has reached iron. And when it gets to iron, Betelgeuse will have poisoned itself on its own fusion waste products. It will collapse and become a supernova. One night, we drive home from a restaurant after dinner. Venus is low in the west. The stars are out. As you pull into the garage, I see Orion. Wait, I say, let me show you Betelgeuse. We cling to each other and creep cautiously 10 feet out onto the icy driveway, turn back and look up. See Orion? There, I say, yes. Betelgeuse is one of his shoulders, the red one, you say. Your eyes are better than mine, but I am more sure-footed than you. Once I joked that we were going into old age with the halt leading the blind. You didn't laugh. As long as your frailties and mine don't overlap, I think we can navigate the terrain ahead of us. Now I can see Betelgeuse, and it is indeed far dimmer than it should be, but I can't perceive the color. It should be much brighter, I tell you, and you believe me. I have already made my wish for us on the first star I saw, but I don't tell you that. By February, Betelgeuse is still dim. It now shines with about 40% of its average luminosity. This is unprecedented. Astronomers have gotten a better view from a ground-based telescope, and they think that it simply exhaled a big cloud of gas, which has veiled part of its brightness. They have posted a photograph of the star, greatly magnified, with the bottom half of the surface dimmer than the rest. as if it were wearing a mask. It is not about to go nova, not yet. Maybe in 100,000 years, still the possibility of this distant calamity lends the dimming a horrible fascination. Here on Earth, a strange and deadly illness flows silently and virtually unnoticed across China. In the autumn of 1992, you and I spent 2 weeks in China. I was part of a small group sent to teach a new surgical technique. The streets were full of bicycles, and the parks were full of Chinese doing Tai Chi in the mornings. In a park, an old man stood practicing calligraphy on concrete squares, using a long brush loaded with plain water for ink. His writing evanesced under the noonday sun as the water evaporated, but he wrote on. The young flowed around him, chattering to each other, walking upon his work, unheeding. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott Connor, for that amazing reading. My name is Matt Kilgore, and I am the Senior Editorial Assistant here at the North Carolina Literary Review. I'm here tonight to proudly introduce our next reader, Susan Wilson, who will be reading her 2020 Alex Albright Creative Nonfiction Prize Honorable Mention essay. Having graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, Wilson's work has appeared in Flying South, Barely South Review, and multiple anthologies. Without further ado, allow me to welcome Susan Wilson in her essay, Measured.
Hi, thank you, Max. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to read. Fried pies, a Southern staple for dessert, or maybe breakfast. Portable and single serve, unless you want to share. I am here to learn to make the pies, to record the recipe, quantities to measure, and actions to take to make a perfect pie. Just come watch. It really isn't hard. My grandmother has always made them. I've had no need to know. I've had no desire to learn. I've always been certain she'll be around to make them. The answer I always took comfort in, until I realized it was a lie. Her flour lives in an open bowl in the cabinet to the left of the sink. It is always there, waiting for a pinch of salt, a portion of shortening, a pour of buttermilk, her long, sharply boned fingers. How much shortening do you use? My pencil willing and ready. She shows me the glob of lard. Buttermilk? I ask as she pours from the carton. Until it feels right, she says, while kneading the dough, gently and quickly folding it within itself. My pencil remains quite still. How do you know the right amounts? Too sticky, more flour, too crumbly, more milk. Her hands pull flour from the side of the bowl, deciding what to take and what to leave, never using it all. The bowl remains lined with flour while the dough rests rounded in its belly. My grandmother grabs my hand and plunges it into the bowl. The pencil rolls silently off the counter. Here, feel it. This is just right. The dough is rolled, the fruit folded within. They will bake in the oven until they are done. It is a shotgun-style house, a clear run, front door to back, an open line of sight, everything there to be seen, nothing there to see. A home that holds little and is always overflowing, where few things are ever measured. Poured concrete steps lead to an empty, always just swept front porch. Warmed if needed by wood laid burning in the hearth, built in the early morning by my grandfather. A day's supply of split wood stacked by the back door. Crocheted rugs cover bare floors. Beneath the giant oak are webbed lawn chairs and galvanized buckets waiting for shelled peas. The pump house roof, outside the reach of oak tree limbs, is draped with old sheets, spread wide and covered with slices of apple, set to dry before they are turned into pies, with pastry that will turn out crusted but tender. Bees swarm over the sheets, landing for a taste of fruit, then move on heavier and lazier than when they arrived. They linger undisturbed as we walk past to pull laundry off the clothesline, while the pies brown and bubble. My grandmother asked me to dip water from the metal barrel beneath the kitchen window to fill a dish for the feral cats. The barrel, almost as tall as me, is always full, its depth both finite as I stand beside it and infinite as I look within. My grandmother died on a Friday in May. I don't remember the date. I don't remember exactly how old she was. Her hedgerow rose was full of tiny clustered bouquets. My grandfather was putting out food and water for the cats. The day was cool, and I saw the smoke drifting from the chimney. I saw his axe handle rising from an old tree stump, but no wood stacked by the door, a measure I finally saw for what it was. Janet and I grew up on farms, cousins, both ready to leave as soon as we could, both terrified of leaving. Just a bit older than me, Janet was starting a career while I was starting college. Scared of failure and returning home, I was equally scared of success and never going back home. She had an apartment and a car and a full-time job. She took me out to dinner and introduced me to my new home, making sure I knew the best places for breakfast and shopping and pastry. She made sure I had groceries. She made time she didn't have. When I almost gave up, she took me in and let me sleep on her couch. She fed me dinner, shared her heat, gave without keeping record, and taught me fear was just part of being fearless. When the diagnosis came, pancreatic cancer, Janet tried the chemo, but after the second dose, she judged the cure a poor alternative. Her husband had died just 3 years earlier from the same diagnosis. Something in the water, an unfortunate coincidence. He battled the disease for 2 years before it won the war. The battle had been hers as well, but her war was ongoing, now 5 years and counting. An enemy she and her husband had first called cancer, that she had renamed grief. An enemy that shapeshifted and pretended to retreat, only to attack from her blind side when she tried to slowly advance. An enemy now come full circle. Little white liars told her she looked good. Do they think I look good or good for a dying woman? She asked. Context. I'm sure they meant well. So Janet passed on the chemo, decided to win by losing, decided not to count her life by rounds of therapy or in white blood cells. No tally marks or check boxes. Fearless. It took her only 3 weeks to die, a measure she could not escape. Janet lived 59 years, 5 months, and 24 days. It would not be difficult to calculate the difference between us, an amount I choose to leave undetermined. A minister attempts to define her life within those numbers. We celebrate the plenty while we acknowledge the stark, painful confirmation of what was shorted. Too late now to celebrate. Carefully chosen words chalk the passing of years, mark accomplishments, and make us smile. All of us trying to be brave while we grieve the words whose absence disclose what never was. All of it neatly laid out as if it were deliberate and planned. It is too soon to celebrate. We memorialize and we mourn. Then we gather for lunch with the family, Janet's closest friends, people I see daily and people I've never seen. Losses must be fed. My grandmother died years ago, so I had made the pies. The flour roughly scooped with a cup, the salt poured into my palm, then thrown into the mix, the shortening sliced from a stick. The buttermilk poured and the dough kneaded until it felt almost right. But I had nowhere to dry apples and no time to wait for them to sweeten with age. Mine are fresh and tossed in sugar. The pies baked until they were done. None of it measured, none of it timed. I watch as the neighbor eyes the pies. Then he turns away. Too full for a whole pie, he says. No problem. I'll lift one from the plate and roughly tear it in half. Here, just have what you want. It's time to visit the gravesite. A last goodbye. My grandmother is buried here too, but I couldn't find the exact spot without going grave to grave. The dates I can't remember are carved into a stone I've never seen. I do not visit her here. Janet's space has been prepared, the raw ground precisely cut, carefully and gently filled, a mound of earth for cover that will slowly flatten in time, as it heals, as if it had never been torn open. The wounded earth above her now concealed by flowers too numerous to count, waiting for a single marker in stone that will never truly measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for sharing your essay. That was lovely.
Thank
To
you.
read the rest of these essays, you can view the 2021 issue of NCLR Online for free when it is published this January. So now I would like to introduce Melanie Moore, North Carolina Humanities Council's Development and Communications Manager, to tell us a little bit more about the Linda Flowers Literary Award and the North Carolina Humanities Council.
Good evening, everyone. A big thank you to the North Carolina Literary Review for making this virtual event happen tonight, and to all the amazing writers for sharing their work with us. This has already been such a rejuvenating evening for me personally. I have goosebumps all over. As Bethany said, I'm Melanie Richeson, and I am the Development and Communications Manager for the North Carolina Humanities Council. As a co-sponsor of tonight's event, I want to spend just a few moments sharing about the North Carolina Humanities Council and who we are. The North Carolina Humanities Council is one of 55 state humanities councils located within each state and U.S. territory. The North Carolina Humanities Council is your statewide nonprofit and affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. We were created almost 50 years ago to ensure that the public humanities thrive in North Carolina, and we continue this work today by spurring dialogue, creating opportunities to deepen our connections, and strengthening our statewide community. We've been fortunate to work with the North Carolina Literary Review this year and in years prior to publish the work of our annual Linda Flowers Literary Award winner. And I want to thank the editor, Dr. Margaret Bauer, who is also on our board of trustees, for this continued partnership. It is through innovative programming and partnerships like these that we, as the North Carolina Humanities Council, are able to directly fund and support so many humanities initiatives across the state. Someone who deeply understood the importance of the humanities and the work of the North Carolina Humanities Council was the late Linda Flowers, for whom our award is named. As Linda Flowers said herself, quote, "Education in the humanities is equipment for living." Some of you may remember her as a past North Carolina Humanities Council trustee, but she was also a well-respected professor, author, and humanist. As a way to honor her memory, the North Carolina Humanities Council annually awards the Linda Flowers Literary Award to North Carolina writers who care, as she did, about our state and writing truthfully. Linda Flowers may be best well known for her book entitled Thrown Away: Failures of Progress in Eastern North Carolina, which, as Flowers said, focused on, quote, real men and women having to make their way in the face of changing, onrushing, and typically uncaring world. So since 2001, the North Carolina Humanities Council has invited entries of original, unpublished fiction, nonfiction, or poetry for our annual Linda Flowers Literary Award that detail intimate, provocative, and inspiring portraitures of North Carolina. This year, we were pleased to have 3 judges who read dozens of entries and thoughtfully came to a decision as to this year's winner. I want to personally thank Luke Hankins, Terry Kennedy, and Zelda Lockhart for all of their hard work and thoughtfulness in selecting the winner of our 2020 Linda Flowers Literary Award. And it is my pleasure now to state that that winner is Mildred K. Barya. And here to introduce Mildred is Mary. So Mary, I turn it over to you, and once again want to say thank you for having the North Carolina Humanities Council here this evening.
Thank you, Melanie, for sharing that information. My name's Mary Myers, and I'm an editorial assistant here at NCLR. Tonight, we are fortunate to have Mildred Barya with us virtually, reading her 2020 Linda Flowers Literary Award-winning essay, Being Here in This Body. Her essay was described as, quote, at once philosophical and well-crafted, provocative from beginning, and connects the reader to Barya's inner musing and memories. By this year's judges, Luke Hankins, Terry L. Kennedy, and Zelda Lockhart. The editorial staff of the North Carolina Literary Review is proud to feature this essay in our forthcoming 30th issue, due out next summer. Mildred is a writer from Uganda and an assistant professor at UNC Asheville, where she teaches poetry, fiction, hybrid genres, and world literature. She has published 3 poetry collections and has been featured in Poetry Quarterly, Matters of Feminist Practice Anthology, Northeast Review, and more. She currently serves on the board of African Writers Trust and hosts the Poetria reading events at Malaprop's Independent Bookstore in Asheville. Please welcome Mildred Barya.
Thank you. I appreciate you all for being here tonight, and it's an honor to share my work. I'll begin with a section that's subtitled The Humming Self. And what I will say briefly is that it features a box turtle that I found in my driveway one day and moved it to a place of safety. The Humming Self. I've thought about myself in the nature of things, the hums I've carried on my back, the weight that bends my back but also sustains it. There is the home of my birth, my country, Uganda, that I've dragged along, even when I would like to convince myself that it is behind me. In truth, it is only as far behind as my back stretches. This home makes its presence known wherever I reside. My dictionary defines homing as an animal's ability to return to a place or territory after traveling a distance away from it. We speak of the animal as having a strong homing instinct. In my experience, the return is always unbidden and internal. It appears in the home I am already in and makes me realize that the home I seek can never be separate from the self. I am like a box turtle. Everything converges in my home self. In biology, convergence is understood as the tendency of unrelated animals and plants to evolve superficially similar characteristics under similar environmental conditions. My turtle and I share the yard. While I do not see it every day, I know that we coexist and are engaged in some sort of partnership. We look out for one another, as it is with all my neighbors. So it feels right for me to use the possessive determiner, my, but in no way do I dream of bringing the turtle into my house, for that would mean captivity. I recognize that it needs what it needs, and respective distance is the nature of our harmonious coexistence. Whereas the turtle is said to adapt to new environments, it can easily die in captivity if kept as a pet. Freedom, therefore, is a dear thing, a fundamental right and necessity for all life. Besides, every life we celebrate affirms our own. Whereas the turtle remains faithful to its patterns, abiding with fortitude through harsh and favorable circumstances, I abandon my routines when it suits me. Whereas the turtle in the wild can grow to a ripe old age, it does not live forever. But who does? Being here in a state. At the time of finding my turtle self, I was not aware that 14 states of America adopted specific turtles as official state symbols. In 1979, North Carolina's General Assembly chose the eastern box turtle, Terrapin carolina carolina, as the approved state reptile. After I discovered this information and the fact that a particular box turtle has made its welcome known to me, I am assured that I belong here. But here is a loaded adverb that requires unpacking. In his selected essays, To Begin Where I Am, Cheslin Maloche starts with what he categorically states is his intention, I am here. He then suggests that those words contain everything that could be said because we not only begin with them, but we also return to them. Perhaps we do so to remind ourselves that we are beings who are aware of our existence, our presence to life. We may use those words to announce ourselves when we arrive somewhere or in our quiet contemplation as an expression of amazement, certainty, or disappointment. Since they offer several interpretations, we cannot confine their meaning to physical space alone. If anything, they may mostly imply one's emotional and experiential standpoint. Maloche's life unfolded in many places across Europe and North America, so it is possible that his intention includes everywhere he has lived and all the things he has experienced at both conscious and subliminal levels, just as the actual geographical space of where he is embodies all his lived experiences and imagination. This reminds me of a 73-year-old painter who, when asked how long it took her to paint a particular new image, said 73 years, implying then that everything she had so far lived or known from birth to that moment was in the painting. Similarly, Maloche highlights what his being here implies by mentioning this earth, on this continent, this city, which is San Francisco. Where he stands precisely remains undisclosed. To orient us further and in more specific terms, he focuses on the proximity of his desk in relation to his body. It is remarkable that when we find ourselves insufficient at communicating with one another important aspects of our being, we are left to reach for the most impersonal, tangible presence, such as a desk, a chair, and if one is lucky, a dog. Maloche acknowledges that what he's trying to convey is incommunicable. He cannot transmit the smell and texture of his skin, everything stored in his memory. Yet, he does not give up because he believes desperately that by sharing his story, limited as he feels by language and the intensity of his state, we might be able to grasp something. He's not asking us to understand. That would be expecting too much. He wants us to hear his experience with compassion because he is here, just like we all are here in some capacity or form. Me reading this, you hearing this, and so the logical step is for us to communicate with one another. I find in Maloche's intention the same experience of most African Americans living in North Carolina and other parts of the States. For centuries, they have been desperately saying, "We are here, let us be." But this attempt to communicate their being here goes unheard. They've used the language they were taught to explain their circumstances. Now I wonder, should they invent a new language? They have memories that run deep, you know. They come from families, you do too. They are breathing, living beings until they are killed in hate crimes and racial violence. Their images and narratives contain 400 years and more. When they say, "We are here," what they mean is a fundamental sense of belonging, freedom, rights, responsibilities, and social justice. Their ancestors across generations uttered the same words: James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, Amiri Baraka, June Jordan, Audre Lorde, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Lawrence Dunbar, Toni Morrison. If I go on to list all their names, I shall run out of space. The living still plead, "We are here." Surely, why should they have to plead to exercise living their lives? If a person has to beg another for permission to keep breathing, it is not just criminal, but reflects a loss of humanness, a loss of soul. If you stepped on my toes and I said, "You're hurting me," wouldn't you remove your foot and hopefully apologize? How about you're kneeling on my neck and I can't breathe? Humans have limits. In every person's intention to be here and to be heard is a wound. When the wound is not addressed, when the wound is disregarded, the moral fabric bears the strain until it ruptures. Police brutality and state-sanctioned violence against Black, Brown, Indigenous, and marginalized populations continue to arouse our indignation. We cannot say the recent public protests are unprecedented because prior to Black Lives Matter, there was the civil rights movement sounding the same call for all the people, regardless of race, to be seen, heard, and respected as human beings, to be recognized as full citizens of this nation with God-given rights to life. Stretching further back to 1789, we notice the same cry and intention of the abolitionist movement. Am I not a man and a brother? Different syntax, yeah, but same hope, same conviction, same reaching for, fumbling for, groping for inclusion. Every impactful explosion that happened between 1789 to now, including the American Civil War, the formation of National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the Harlem Renaissance, demanded a new reality in which all people who are here could live safely, free from racial hatred, discrimination, and all kinds of racist attacks. It is staggering how little has changed. So I ask, are we really our ancestors' wildest dream, like some people have remarked, or their greatest disappointment? The gaping wound festers with each new hate crime perpetrated by police and white vigilante murderers who know they have protection of the law and of a system that continues to turn a blind eye to grave injustices against Black lives. Let's name names lest we forget. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Nina Pope, Botham Jean, Alton Sterling, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Monica Diamond, Terence Crutcher, Trayvon Martin, Freddie Gray, Oscar Grant, Rekia Boyd, Walter Scott, Stephen Clark, Tanisha Anderson, and many more sons and daughters, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters. How do we move forward? Strangely, by returning to I am here, because it defies the laws of the universe to think that we can leap from here to there. You see, the words I am contain everything that we are and all that we aspire to be. They hold the seed of everything we would ever need if we speak them unwaveringly. Malosh said that we return to those words. They are our alpha and omega of peaceful coexistence. If we accept everyone who says, I am, to be, then would have confidence in our collective eyes to forge the next step. It really is that simple, but may require a change in the consciousness of the people who are against others' lives. If acceptance is embraced by all, it could result in a new language. After all, a win-win. Imagine each one of us asking the question, how can I live here in a manner that acknowledges every other person as a human being? Let me clarify. I am refers to a person's sense of being. When it's claimed firmly as an intention, it goes beyond one's mere existence and transforms into the greater self, the essence of oneness, the all-pervading spirit we are told created all things and abides everywhere. If we see every human being in this regard, then we witness ourselves merged with oneness. We would catch that which is eternal and cannot be contained in one space or form, for it resides in each one of us, inasmuch as it resides in another. After all, I am is the name of God, encompassing all that is, affirming our beingness and divinity beyond verbal language and silence. In other words, divine consciousness that enters the void of silence and creates new worlds because the sound in silence is powerful, like breath. Each inhale, exhale starts and ends with where each one of us begins and stands. Therefore, through our body's interconnectedness with other things, the source I am, it is possible to be in a state where language breaks, but sound doesn't. For instance, at the beginning of our lives, the sound spoken into the emptiness, sometimes with our heads facing down and a slap on our buttocks, is our first cry that announces, we are here, we have arrived. It is also our last cry when we transition to face ourselves as if for the first time as co-creators with higher intelligence and other cosmic beings. Back to my title. It has taught me that effective communication utilizes patterns and can be held inside the body without need to engage in words. I cannot exchange words with my turtle, but I can stand silently before it, watch its head emerge, its eyes opening to behold what's before it. And in that moment of stillness, feel that we are communicating. Wittgenstein says, what we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. How true a relief actually to see how the limits of our thoughts and expression in language as we know it can still enable us or even force us to cross over, to bridge the gap that blocks communication, and to realize that what we call the other, however different, is not separate from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mildred, for sharing your work with us. I would now like to introduce Professor Laura Hope-Gill, Director of the Thomas Wolfe Center for Narrative. According to our editor, a conference conversation with Professor Hope-Gill is actually what inspired our forthcoming issue's focus on writing to heal, long before we realized just how appropriate the theme would be in these times. You'll find an essay by Professor Hope-Gill about her innovative teaching in the field of narrative medicine in the print issue next summer. In the meantime, please join us in welcoming and thanking her for leading a conversation with the writers about their essays.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Wow, thank you so much, Mildred and Susan and Carol, for your beautiful words. I am full of your stories. Thank you. And thank you to North Carolina Humanities Council and to your wonderful staff at the North Carolina Literary Review for embracing the topic of writing to heal and the intersection of health and medicine and wellness, which certainly we didn't plan on seeing come into such sharp focus as it has these past 8 months. And my question, I only have one. I have one question because I believe that it's one that more questions can rise out of if they do, and more, we can cross talk a bit. The question is for the writers, what does writing hold for you in your life? And the reason I ask this is because for a long time we've seen science not see the human in medicine. There were some doctors that did, but now it's becoming a part of medical education. And when people are taking care of each other, they're not just taking care of bones and pathology, they're taking care of human life. And so this question is rooted in the issue itself, but it's also rooted in, why do we do this thing that we do? What does writing hold for you in your life? Susan, would you like to begin with this and exploring it? We have 15 minutes or 5 minutes per person, so you can just let it out.
Well, I've always written, but I've found that I've written more in the last 5 to 6 years, primarily because started out with a healthcare issue with my husband and just kind of grew from there. I do work in healthcare also, and I find a lot of people who work in healthcare like to write because they probably chose the wrong profession. They thought they were very analytical, and they are, but then in reality, they find that they're also very creative. And that helps us, I think, a lot in medicine to think outside the box and help our patients, because they need alternative ways and they need to find, an answer. And sometimes the one that's written in black and white is not the right answer, because every person is an individual. And I think in healthcare, a lot of times we're trying to do that and it's hard. So we need that creative outlet. So we start writing. And that's one of the reasons I started writing. And as I found, as I wrote, that it really helped me figure out a lot of things about myself, about other people, about why they did things that they did, about why I did things that I did. And I found it to be somewhat, I guess, cathartic, but not necessarily that as much as it is just I'm starting to understand myself a little bit better. And I'm understanding other people a little bit better.
Thank you so much. And what is your field in healthcare? What is it that you do?
I'm a pharmacist.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And with the in your writing process, how is it like with the in pharmacy work, in healthcare work, everything is right. It's little
It is.
everything has to be box ticked up for very, very good reasons.
Yes.
Writing is not like that, right? There's no box.
No.
How did that feel, or how did it feel to move into that when you were first starting, and how is it now? And
I think, like I said, primarily it helped me to work through issues that I wasn't able to work through in that process of just trying to have a yes/no answer. The piece that I wrote about my grandmother and my cousin, the instances themselves were far apart, and it took me a long time. I started writing one story, and suddenly I realized I was writing another story. And it's just, I think there was so much I needed to say in that particular case about what I had tried to learn from my grandmother, and how so much of what you're living, when you're living it, you don't understand what it means. It's only when you go back in retrospect and say, oh, now I understand what all that was about. I understand why that person did what they did. I understand the meaning behind everything that was occurring. I just think there's so much that writing allows me to sit there and reflect on and be able to answer those questions for myself, if for no one else. And I hope that, some of what I'm writing, maybe if I'm not able to express to my children how I feel about certain things, that maybe when they go back and read some of this that I wrote, that they'll go, oh, I understand what Mom meant the whole time. Why she acted the way she did, and why she prevented me from doing this, or why she encouraged me to do that. But that's a lot of it, I think. And as I said, there's been my husband had a serious healthcare issue, and that really started things for me. But as far as writing again, I'd always journaled for my children and tried to keep records for them. But it was just different, and it's been different since then. Trying to get back into recording and understanding a lot of myself.
Oh, how wonderful. Thank you. And I hope we can continue the conversation, just you and me at another time.
Love to.
I really loved your piece. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Beautiful. What comes to mind is Joseph Campbell says that poets have the courage to follow the echoes of the eloquence within. And it was that when you're writing the story, you thought you were writing this one, and then this echo. Another story comes in as well. Time collapses around illness, doesn't it? And around grief.
It does. Yes, I think so. And I think it, like I said, you don't make the connection sometimes until you just all of a sudden there it is.
Right. And your story will help others see why they're having a hard time accepting. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Mildred, it's so good to see you. Last time I saw you, we were on a sailboat together and you were about to go back to California. Mildred and I went for a sail together on my little boat. So your piece is so beautiful and it's just lovely. These situations allow us to remember what it was once like to be within 6 feet of somebody else. So how lovely. So Mildred, writing. What does it bring? What does writing hold for you in your life?
Wow, that's a very good question. And it's something I've asked myself again and again. And at this moment, it really holds the space for sanity for me. It's like I go to writing to stay sane. And it holds peace, it holds joy. And there's so much that's happening outside my life that I feel is out of my control. But whenever I am in the story, whenever I'm writing, I feel that I actually have a sense of control, not because I'm trying to make things go a certain way, but because I'm willing to hear where things need to go. And that adds the layer of listening, because I find that in writing, maybe I'm not writing as much as I am listening, actually. And I've come to appreciate that more every year that passes and I'm doing more writing. I appreciate the listening that comes from entering the writing, as if it's this space that you go through a veil. And once you're there, you write and you find your sense of joy, your sense of peace, your sense of sanity, but also my sense of connection with other people, because I don't just write about issues that are personal and important to me. I feel like I'm writing about issues that many of us are really concerned about. And when I do realize that stories, for centuries, our ancestors have always had stories that they share, that they pass on. So it's also comforting to know that I am engaged in something that's not really like rocket science. It's something that we all share when it comes to loving stories and understanding human behavior, understanding ourselves. We go to the stories. So that's the space that writing has for me.
I so appreciate your attention to listening. And in that beautiful essay, we can see the moments of listening between the movements. We listen to the turtle. We listen to Czesław Miłosz. We listen to you. And we listen to history. In the composition of that piece, when did you start to see to think about turtles? When did you start to see the compartments, I guess, or each little turtle, if I could use that metaphor?
Strangely, the turtles came first, and I wrote the piece about the turtle as this flash nonfiction piece and forgot about it. But then when in May, when, there was a lot happening in terms of Black Lives Matter, I felt that I needed to do something. And then I realized that, I could march, I could speak out, but that's never enough for me because it's almost like you're reacting to what's happening. And I'm coming from the culture of reacting to the culture of responding and also being proactive about things that I can always stay engaged with. So that shifted. Then I started to write about Black Lives Matter and to revisit Malosh. And then I realized, then I kept seeing the turtle. It started to come again and again. Then I was like, well, it looks like the turtle has something to teach me about what I'm processing. And so then I started to put all the pieces together. And then I realized it was a long essay. I tried to finish it at 4 pages. It kept going. And then I said, okay, it won't be more than 7 pages. It kept growing. And at some point I was like, all right, I just need to obey what's happening and let the essay take charge.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I love that you had the medicine cards. And that's a lovely bridge between cultures. And I remember learning about the medicine. First, someone gave you the medicine cards, and how are these animals medicine? But of course, that opens a whole new story for us and a whole new awareness. And the whole piece that you wrote is medicine. And
thank you.
May many people read it and receive it. And thank you. I'm honored that I got to tonight. And it's lovely to see you, my dear friend.
Lovely to see you too. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carol, it is so good to see you. And Carol and I are studying together and at Lenore Rhine. And I'm humbled to say she is my student, although every teacher worth her salt knows that it's a two-way street. And so Carol, I'm delighted that your essay is here with us this evening. It was lovely to hear it again. So I ask you the question, my dear friend, what does writing hold for you in your life?
I started moving into creative writing from technical writing because I wanted to communicate with a broader audience. I wanted people to know what it was like to be a surgeon. I wanted people to know that surgeons are human beings, that women can become surgeons, that it's a worthy thing to aspire to, that the human body is beautifully made, all of these things. And then I enrolled in Lenore Rhine, and a funny thing happened on the way to this essay. I began by studying narrative healthcare and writing as healing, which is the topic of this issue. And when I wrote this particular essay, it was actually out of a place of personal confusion, concern about growing old, concern about the pandemic, grappling with my own identity as no longer being a surgeon because I'd retired after doing it all my life. And so in terms of this essay, the writing of it and the circumscribing it by the cyclic waning of the star Betelgeuse was a healing act for me.
Beautiful. And you started writing the essay before the pandemic.
Yeah, I did. I started it. It started as being about aging and Betelgeuse. And in the original form, it sort of went month by month. And then we got into March and we had the pandemic. And then we got into the late spring and I couldn't see a way to bring it to conclusion. I really actually was grappling with a technical issue with the essay because, of course, the pandemic is still evolving and still part of our lives, and we don't know the ending, although I do have faith it will end well eventually for us because human beings do come out on top. But so from the technical standpoint of the essay, what I decided to do was circumscribe it with the return to full luminosity of the star. Not to give away the ending, because hopefully you'll read it when it's online. But that was a technical issue that I grappled with. And I had a lot of help from my classmates and from Laura and people who read it and made suggestions. And that's how it evolved.
And it's amazing how a piece of work, how a draft can receive a blow from what's going on while we're writing it. We can think that it's going this way. And then, like a diagnosis itself, illness will throw itself at a person, and history will throw itself at a work of writing. And it's really powerful how you absorb it. And the form is loose enough to absorb it and hold it, as we are, right? With our diagnoses and our own tragedies and shocks. So the work itself is a body of resilience and power.
Yes, yes.
Beautiful. And it's so lovely to see you. And it is exactly 7:00 p.m. And I hope that these questions nourish everyone and that you turn to writing for your own healing. And we all have some amazing body of work, as well as our amazing bodies of being bodies. Thank you for having me here this evening. And thank you, Susan and Mildred and Carol. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
And thank you all.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you to all of our authors as well for that lovely discussion and for your wonderful work. We thank our viewers for tuning in and supporting the North Carolina Literary Review. If you'd like to keep up to date on all our events, such as this one, and our contests, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. To receive the 2021 issue and to read Mildred's story, go to our website and click on subscriptions. You subscribe this weekend through Sunday, please just send us your order confirmation and we'll send you a free 2019 issue, in which we've also published the 2018 Linda Flowers Award essay by Jennifer Brown called Landscape with Death and Birth, which has recently been selected for inclusion in the next Artisan Anthology. Thank you all again very much for coming out and watching. Thank you to our authors and editors, the North Carolina Humanities Council, and to Max behind the scenes as well. And as we overcome the COVID-19 pandemic together, events like tonight's are really, they help strengthen our community and our spirits. We here at the NCLR wish you all health and wellness. Good night.